We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We're a news generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, March 13th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining us today is Cheska Dainhan.
Happy Thursday, everyone!
Happy Thursday! And we're pleased to have Julie and Kim back.
Yay!
Happy Almost Friday!
Happy Almost
so
Friday.
good to be back here
Great
today.
to have you back too. Now both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, we're going to begin our show today for this Thursday with our keyword news. Our keyword for today is golf. Now we previously discussed on NewsGen how golf has surged in popularity among Korean millennials and Gen Z in recent years, driven by a post-pandemic increase in outdoor activities and the sports' newfound appeal among the younger generations. However, this trend seems to have reversed course here in the country. According to local media, the number of golf course users nationwide has been declining since 2023, and additionally, South Korea's golf apparel market shrunk from around $2.6 billion in 2023 to approximately $2.4 billion in 2024, which has led to major brands to close stores or even withdraw from the market. So do you play golf, and what do you think is behind this shift in playing golf?
Yeah, so I actually learned how to play golf like around, I would say, last summer. And I did it because I wanted to put the effort towards going outside the house more. And I wanted to start a new hobby. But I'm going to be completely honest, it was really difficult for me to get into. For me, I guess I just didn't find it as fulfilling compared to other sports that I personally like to enjoy. And as for why the trend in general is fading, I think several factors are at play. Cost and accessibility are a major concern, and there's also a growing negative perception of golf due to the environmental impacts and its association with elitism. Additionally, golf is a very technically challenging sport, so casual players do find it more difficult and might give up more easily, is my guess, but at least that's the case for me too.
I think it's relatively a very hard sport, especially as you mentioned. It's hard to learn it. It's hard to continue because of the cost and also the environmental impacts.
Exactly.
Now, what about you, Cheska?
You know, the funny thing is, I played golf when I was 9.
9?
Yeah.
Wow.
So way before this boom for golf started, and I started in New Zealand. But back then it was more of like a family sport. You dress very casually. You know, you go out with your grandparents, just have a really lovely day. You know, walking around the fields. So conversely, when I came back to Korea as an MZ, to be very honest, I actually stopped playing golf because I didn't find it efficient in terms of time and cost. So I still have friends who play golf, and I definitely see the appeal. Like, you get to be out in the nature, mingle with friends, and even network with colleagues. But I think there's a lot of hurdle, like in terms of time, cost, and as Hangjun mentioned, you know, perception of what golf is here in South Korea, for it to become more of a daily sport, not so much like an elitist sports or, you know, very specialized sports as it is,
I mean, trades come and go. So before we had a really big tennis boom, and then it went to golf. So who knows which sports will become big in Korea?
There's no tennis boom was a thing.
Oh, yeah. And that was our keyword news for this Thursday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Thursday is when we shine the spotlight on the Korean wave and the global appeal of Korean culture. Take a look at the screen to find out more. 2025 marks a historic milestone for Korea. This year commemorates 80 years since Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule, as well as 60 years since the normalization of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Japan. As Korean culture continues to capture global attention, more people are not just enjoying K-pop and K-content, but also showing deeper curiosity about Korea's history. So, at first glance, history and pop culture might seem worlds apart. K-pop, K-dramas, and variety shows are the big trend these days when it comes to K-culture, while history has often been viewed as something academic and distant. So I want to ask you, Cheska, what is drawing K-culture fans more into Korean history, and how are they accessing all these information and history in general?
Usually, as you mentioned, I mean, history has this connotation of being academic,
Right.
but I think the most accessible medium so far has been content, especially the booming growing and growing K-dramas and K-movies. So among KoreanWave fans, a lot of them actually learn about Korean history through watching these content, as many of them actually incorporate Korean history into its storyline. For instance, we have the historical genre, like period film. In Korean, we call it 사극, and it has become quite popular among K-Wave fans. And also movies like Hallyu that recently came out, and K-drama Mr. Sunshine all deal with the Japanese occupation period. So is Pachinko, which I think a lot of viewers know and is very popular. And movies like Taxi Driver or the drama Times of May, they take place during the democratization movement period, which is also very, very critical and important to a lot of Korean people. Now, films such as Ode to My Father are set in the Korean War, so already you can see that a lot of these popular content deal with Korean history. In order to understand and really immerse oneself into the emotional storyline and the epic storyline that goes on, I think people are learning more and more about Korean history this way.
Right, so the more they actually know and learn about Korean history, the more they can resonate with these content.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's the same for us when we watch something and we understand the background history. We get so emotionally more attached to it, right? I think it's
Definitely. Then, Julie, I want to ask you, is there any data that really highlights this growing global interest in Korean history?
Yeah, so according to a survey conducted by the Seoul Tourism Organization, palaces and historical sites were the most visited tourist attractions by international visitors, with 70% respondents saying that they visited the sites. This suggests that foreign tourists favor historical landmarks over theme parks or recreational facilities, at 55% reported visiting landmarks and theme parks, while 49% visited resorts and rest areas.
That is very interesting. Historical sites in Korea are climbing up the charts when it comes to which popular tourist attractions exist here in Korea. Now, before we move on, we also asked our viewers, if you could visit one historical site in Korea, which would you choose and why? And here are 3 of their responses. Our first comment for this Thursday is by Sheepkid1. I definitely like to visit museums that feature Korean history and the Korean War. Benny D97 Gyeongju to experience a Hanok stay there, and then Gamcheon Cultural Village in Busan. I'd also love to visit the DMZ, the Korean Demilitarized Zone. Finally, studio visionary Anna says, I would like to check out Deoksugung Palace and do a Hanok stay. Plus, I would really like to wear a hanbok as it looks so pretty. Well, thank you for all those lovely comments. So for those who are interested in Korean history but don't really know where to start, we've got some good recommendations for you on NewsGen. So each of us 3, will introduce a historically significant place that's worth visiting. So we're going to start with Cheska.
So let's take our viewers on a little bit of emotional roller coaster. Since we are talking about the Japanese occupation period, I think it will help a lot of viewers, not just in terms of historical education, but also for the viewers to further enjoy many of the popular K-drama series and movies also, including Pachinko and Gyeongsang Creatures from Netflix. And there's a very important historical site one can visit, which they're seeing right now, called Seodaemun Prison in Seoul. I think the closest analogy is that of Nazi concentration camp, and for this particular reason, actually a lot of international tourists do visit this place. It is a prison that was built by the Residency General of Japan in 1908 to imprison Korean independence activists who fought against the cruel colonial regime.
Right.
Now, this place is very symbolic of many things: grief, pain, cruelty, but also this unwavering spirit of the freedom fighters. And I've actually visited once to give a tour to a group of international tourists. And when you actually walk in, you get this sense, because you see the traces and remnants of this unspeakable and malicious torture that Japanese soldiers at the time inflicted upon the freedom fighters. And historically, it's been told that they devised over 70 methods to torture people. And what really breaks your heart, especially if you're a Korean and you walk into the space, or anyone, as a matter of fact, is the fact that you can really tell that the Japanese soldiers devised every possible way to destroy people's spirits, including their coffins and boxes filled with needles. And they would throw 20, 30 people into a space that could barely hold like 5 grown adults, and beating them up and starving them. And then they would lock them up in an upright coffin, so that not only would they be claustrophobic, but they would be emotionally destroyed and would lose the will to fight for freedom. And I would highly recommend it to anyone and everyone who wants to understand what Koreans actually fought for in history. Yeah.
Right, especially once again, as this year marks 80 years of Korea's liberation.
Exactly.
from
Yeah, it's a very important year too.
Right, definitely. And if I may add on, there are free Dawson tours available at this Hallyu prison that's offered in 4 languages, Korean, English, Chinese, and Japanese. And you can find more information about the opening hours and the admission fees on the official website, which is also available in these 4 languages. So we're now going to move on to our second recommendation. I would like to basically recommend one of the 5 royal palaces in Seoul. These palaces are some of the most well-known historical sites here in Korea, but I specifically like to recommend the Deoksugung Palace in central Seoul. Now, although this palace is smaller than Gyeongbokgung or Changdeokgung palaces, this palace is a blend of Korean and Western architectural styles that really make it unique. And specifically, one of its key landmarks is a Jungmyeongjeon Hall that you're currently seeing on the screen now. It was originally built as an imperial library in the late 1890s during the short-lived Korean Empire era. And beyond its beauty, this hall carries a really painful chapter of Korean history. This is where the Ulsa Treaty was forcibly signed in 1905 under Japanese pressure, stripping Korea of its diplomatic sovereignty. So this kind of links to what Cheska mentioned because the treaty was kind of like the start of this painful history of Korea. So
I was actually kind of thinking that too. It linked right with...
Right. So now we're going to move on. We're going to travel a bit more later in the 20th century. So Julian, what's your pick?
Yeah, so I highly recommend visiting the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. It's about a 3.5-hour drive from Seoul, and I believe it's worth seeing because it plays a huge, crucial role in Korea's modern history, and it is something that remains to be highly relevant today.
Right.
The DMZ offers insight into the Korean War and provides a unique, sobering experience unlike anywhere else in the world. I actually first visited when I was in high school, and while I learned about the Korean War and the atrocities behind it, seeing it firsthand, witnessing the raw, unfiltered reality of Korea's division was truly an eye-opening experience, and I think it's really, really worth visiting if you're there. And it serves as a powerful reminder of the lasting impacts of the war that is technically still going on to this day right now. Visitors can see the militarized demarcation line, underground tunnels dug by North Korea, and other significant landmarks in the area. And one important note, for those who are planning to visit, make sure you bring a passport as entry requires passing through a restricted civilian-controlled zone. And fortunately, there are many tourist groups that operate daily going from Seoul to the DMZ, making it very easy and convenient to visit. So if you're interested, I highly recommend using these services.
Definitely. All right, so now after the break, we'll be joined by an American graduate student currently studying Korea to gain more insights into this growing fascination with Korean history. Stay tuned.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang.News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
We're pleased to be joined today by Christopher Gao, a graduate student from the U.S. currently attending Seoul National University. Great to have you back on the show, Christopher.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Christopher, we'd first like to ask you, what made you interested in Korean history in the first place?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that led me to become interested in Korean history in the first place was ironically what I was not taught about it during grade school and high school. So we always learned about, World War II in great detail, but then I feel like we either barely touched on or entirely skipped the Korean War in this rush to discuss the, Vietnam War, which I think is a testament to how much that conflict kind of dominated the American conscience in the, the latter half of the 20th century. But once I had the opportunity to kind of learn more in detail about the Korean War through some coursework in undergraduate, I think that opened up a lot of questions for me about how Korea ended up as this proxy for great power conflict and how the peninsula ended up divided in the first place after World War II, and then ultimately who bears responsibility for that division, which lasts until today. So I think that for me was the impetus for wanting to dive deeper and learn about this history, which is still highly relevant and connected to the current events as they're unfolding.
Christopher, I really admire that you really wanted to investigate something that was actually missing from the education. Korea's history spans over 5,000 years, as you may know, with countless significant diplomatic and political events that happened over the course of years. Which historical events are the most widely recognized overseas, would you say?
Right. So yeah, despite there being, this 5,000-year history, I do think that in reality, like a lot of the, international recognition is going to be more about these like modern Korean historical moments. So first, I think, despite how many gaps there might be about this in our education, I still think the Korean War is one of the most well-known aspects of Korean history. Obviously, is a major Cold War conflict, and many people, Americans or people of other nationalities, might have had relatives that even fought in that war, and my family also did. So that would be one reason that would be in the international kind of recognition category. But second, I think Korea's incredible economic development. So obviously the Miracle on the Han River is also pretty well known. A lot of people seem to be aware that Korea went from one of the poorest countries in the world to now the 12th largest economy and a leader in high tech and heavy manufacturing. So I think this one is also big because Korea's kind of, experience with economic development is very powerful, instructive tale for those in developing countries who are looking to replicate these successes in industrialization and education-centered development that were achieved here. So I think that's another big one. And then third, this one is like, I would say, it seems to be more recently recognized with the democratization movements in the 1980s, like Gwangju Uprising, and those are increasingly recognized, I would say, in the foreign press and stuff for their role in shaping the vibrant democracy that South Korea is today. And I think we saw more recognition of this in particular in the international press, especially after martial law was declared late last year. So the world saw Koreans immediately mobilized to block this, that attempted self-coup that happened. I think a lot of people saw how that fairly recent history of democratization has led people in this country to be highly civically engaged, even amid these renewed challenges, and how, even amid those challenges, how vibrant Korean democracy is as a result of that history.
Yeah, so hi, Christopher. I think it's really important that you mentioned that the American education system didn't educate us on history of other countries, because as a fellow American, I also felt that way too. So going off of that, are there any other historical events or moments that you think deserve more attention globally?
Right. So I think one historical event people would probably be interested to know more about might be the late 16th century Imjin War with Japan, so specifically Admiral Yi Sun-shin's victories against that much larger Japanese navy with that tactical use of turtle ships, which was allegedly the first ever ironclad warship that Korea developed. So I think this moment, beyond being an impressive victory, speaks to something broader about Korean history. So obviously there's this larger context where Korea repeatedly found itself in the crossfire or directly in the crosshairs of larger regional powers, whether it be China, Japan, or later those Western imperial powers. So there have been many challenges to Korean sovereignty through its history. And I think Admiral Yi Sun-shin and these turtle ships really embody this kind of underdog spirit and resilience in the face of adversity that has defined Korea's historical experience. And that same sense of resilience, I would say, is very much apparent in modern Korean history as well, with the country crawling from the shadow of conflict to become a leading economy and democracy. So I think in that way, this earlier historical moment would be worth knowing, that Imjin War and the Admiral Yi Sun-shin, in that context of the repeated invasions and conflict that occurred on or around the peninsula, and also in light of what that says about the national kind of conscious in Korea today.
Definitely. All right, Christopher, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Right, so as we mentioned earlier at the top of our show, this year is a big year for Korean history with some major anniversaries. Now, what this means is that we're gonna see a series of special events and commemorations. They've already taken place, some will take place. So, Cheska, what can we expect ending off?
Since we are celebrating the 80th anniversary of liberation, I think it is definitely monumental. And even if you can't visit Korea, I hope you can, but there will be a lot of events related to showcasing movies, possibly contents about freedom fighters and Japanese occupation in your local Korean cultural center. So please do take time to check them out, because as Christopher mentioned, you can learn so much about Korean spirit, the resilience, and what we really stand for when you go through and understand the kind of history that we went through. And even if you do happen, and if you do happen to be in Korea during August 15th, in Korea we call it 광복절, literally Liberation Day. I'm quite confident there will be a lot of contents and events happening here, and you'll be able to come and participate and learn more about the Korean history.
Definitely. Now, anything you'd like to add to, Julian?
Yeah, so like everyone mentioned, this year is significant for Korean history with major anniversaries like the 80th anniversary of Liberation Day. We can expect various commemorative events, including government ceremonies, exhibitions, and international awareness campaigns, and also the Cyber Diplomacy Organization, VANC, also known as the Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, is also planning various campaigns for the 80th Liberation Day, such as honoring a 21st century foreign independence activist and using AI technology to promote Korea's history globally.
Wow.
Details are available on the website for those who are wanting to participate.
Definitely a lot to look forward to in terms of Korean history in 2025. And that's all we have for this episode of News Generation, but we will be back tomorrow, Friday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Jessica Dainhong.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julian Kim.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for your time and hope you tune in to our show tomorrow as well. We are
News Generation.
Generation.